Unlearned Unlimited. What? Unlearned Unlimited. Yeah. Hey.
Hello, welcome to Unlearned Unlimited podcast. My name is Dr. Sito Narcisse, and I'm with my co-host,
Tatiana, Echevarria.
We're so super excited. Welcome to this episode. And this episode is called, What If We Killed Grade Levels? Breaking Free from the Future Careers and AI. We're super excited. So today, we got a little twist, Tatiana, just a little bit.
A little one.
We decided that we're going to bring on a school counselor. And for those of you that may or may not know, school counselors, they deal with all type of stuff in school.
They wear so many hats.
Right.
So many hats.
People think it's just the teachers, but it's really more than just teachers. They think they're like therapists. They deal with kids trying to figure out how to navigate life, social, emotional,
culturally,
scheduling,
all kinds of things.
You name the stuff, they deal with it. And so we thought, well, why not ask them about this grade level stuff, right? Because in schools, they're usually like either put in alphabetical order or they're put in different ways, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you'd be surprised how much school counselors really know that they just always don't say in public. Well, actually, I don't know if they can say everything in public, really. So, but the reality is, again, we're trying to get the people's voices heard. And so, if it's your first time on our podcast at Unlearned Unlimited, please make sure you press share, like, and subscribe to our show. We're super excited about that, but we always want to try to get the Unlearned Unlimited approaches of truths of the world. It's very unfiltered, our approach and everything that we do. So our guest speaker is Sarah Lauture Pullen. Is that, did I pronounce that correct, Sarah?
With Lauture Pullen, yeah, but Lauture, you said it right away.
Right, I was going to put a little French in there, so a Creole. No, but we're super excited, Sarah. Sarah, we're talking to you from, and you're located out in Nashville, Tennessee, is that right? Yeah, and so we're super excited that you came to join the show and to give us a different perspective. A couple of things we learned about you. We're going to let you talk about yourself a little bit because we love for people to come on and share their stuff. But you were the 2024 Early Career Educator of Excellence. And didn't you win that award recently, last year or something like that?
Yeah, so in 2024, just spread the word and ask people, hey, vote for me if you pull that. I fit this bill. But essentially it's for anyone with 3 to 5-ish years of educating experience, who've shown just exemplary contributions to their profession, whatever that may be. It could have been a teacher that won, or a counselor. Other teachers won other awards as well. So I won an honoree last year for the year of 2024. So that was awesome.
And how many years have you been in education? How many years
I've been in education now going into my 7th year.
7th year. Okay. So let's do this. Let's go like we always do, Tatiana. I'll let you tell a little bit about yourself, a little bio, so people can know who you are, where you're from, what in your context, and then share some achievements you've had.
Yeah, like why education, why school counseling, all the things.
All the things. So I am originally from Stamford, Connecticut. So that is just, people be like, Connecticut, what? New York City. I'm from New York. I just tell people at this point, because, I'm just,
Stamford is 30 minutes out of Manhattan for you future there you are.
Understand exactly. You have to understand my upbringing. I grew up going to Times Square for my 17th birthday, catching the train. That's just how we grew up. And so we're from Connecticut, born and raised there. Moved to New Haven, which is essentially the same city as Yale. Again, I have to use these sections for people to understand. And I did attend Southern Connecticut State University in Haven, Connecticut. For my first 2 years, I did some commuting and also staying on campus. But in the last 2 years, I was a resident advisor. Shout out Barnum Hall. And so I did that for my last 2 years. After actually graduating college, I went straight into getting my master's. So I was the youngest person to graduate from my master's program. It was actually a 1-year accelerated program out of Johns Hopkins University School of Education. And so I graduated with my master's degree at 22 years old. So I just graduated. Listen, I have an older brother and sister, and so they had some, difficulties and obstacles finishing school like straight through. And so I first one, they were like, you gonna go straight reverse. So I did. It was difficult for sure though. I think being as young as I was, I didn't take a gap year or anything. And so yeah, literally graduated in June of 2015 from undergrad, and then that same month moved to Baltimore, Maryland, and started my master's degree program. Graduated July 2016 with my master's in counseling. But then I took like 2 to 3 years to just get my, bearings and work in education. So I started in some like after school programming stuff, transitioned into becoming like a multicultural intern in Boston, and a history teacher. So I taught for a little bit. I was so scared to teach. Let's just put it that way. But I did a good job. Apparently I taught 7th and 8th grade and American history, and it was phenomenal and awesome. And so I worked out in Boston for a little bit, and then straight out of Boston, I moved to Nashville, and that's what landed me in Nashville was applying for the role of founding school counselor. So I've been in that role for the past going on 7 years. I've been the founding counselor at KIPP, Antioch College Prep Middle School in Antioch, Tennessee. So it's still in Nashville. It's just a community or city in Nashville.
Yeah. Yes.
And so,
and I think it's a diverse community too, right? You probably say you have kids from all over different countries.
yes, they're from, they're Kurdish, they are Ethiopian, they are Somalian, they're Egyptian, have a huge Egyptian population. And then they're, of course, Mexican and Venezuelan and just from Uruguay, like a lot. And so I actually have a device that I use to speak to a lot of our families. The hope and desires to actually be able to speak it myself. But in the meantime, we do use a device to communicate with families. And so there's no...
Kudos to you for finding ways to really, make sure you connect with those families, because there is nothing like being able to find someone that is taking the extra step to be able to understand what it is that they need to say.
And this past school year, thank you. This past school year, actually, I had my first student who spoke no English at all. And I was like hyperventilating because I was like, I want to be able to meet this child's needs, and what about this barrier? No barriers. Listen, she was in my office every day, like, and I'd be like, hold on, let me get my phone. And we're just, no barrier. And so that was a huge success story for me this past school year, was being able to support a child through some true emotional distress. Even though I speak the language, I'll still be able to be there for her.
Well, I kind of like it. People don't always, when they think of Nashville, they think of like cowboy hats or something. They don't know, like, we have like people from all over there as well too. It's a fast growing city, beautiful city. I remember when I used to be out there, I used to teach a little bit. And so getting really a good sense around that community, the people there, it was a great experience. And so, so let's get right into it, right? Because we have a limited time to ask you some explosive questions. So we have a little bit of cheat notes. We had to do our homework. So, but we're gonna start off a little bit and say, talk to you a little bit about some school counseling. So let me get a little bit of data and we'll kind of talk through that. So historically, as I shared with you before, we're going to be talking about like, what if we actually killed grade levels? How does that mean to you? And what is that around it being Unlearned Unlimited? But I want to set us a little bit before we go down into that, right? So historically, like, grade level systems have been like the bedrock of education.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to go from one grade to another. And the foundational assumptions around that are usually around learning and development and like how kids matriculate, and kids like formulate through these grades. Like, you got to learn these sets of standards. You got to do this. You got to pass a test, right? So forth and so on. So if we truly abolished the grade levels, right? Because, we have schools that are like competency-based approach now and all these different things.
Yeah.
If we said, forget all that stuff, let's get kids to get to each grade level based on a skill or some other metrics or whatever.
Yeah.
Or like developmentally appropriate ages.
Like, you have to come up with some standardized rubric or whatever, right? Whatever. What kind of chaos you think that would cause our society?
Right. I mean, I think that would not be, people would not like that. This is very, I mean, I don't know, Sito, if you were on the tail end of this, but like when Tennessee enacted that law of like a child can't go to 4th grade until they can, they have the standard of knowing how to read, essentially. And it's like parents were mad. Parents were angry. And it's like, it's kind of a chicken or egg conversation. Where did it start? Is it on the parents? Is it on the school? And I think people would not be happy about it. But I also think when we do the whole, you can't do this until you have to meet the standards in order to matriculate, we also handicap children in them learning the necessary foundational skills of life. For instance, I can only think on like my experiences, but for instance, we have 8th graders who don't know how to open lockers. Why? That I was opening my locker in 6th grade, but in that school, kids have little, they're kind of like cubbies ish in the hallways until 8th grade, they finally get a locker. And again, in retrospect, I'm thinking, wow, well, I had middle school was lockers that they prepared us in elementary school to have locker, period. And so oftentimes there are things like, well, you can't get this until you show me these behaviors. My understanding is allow them to do the thing, because the reality is what school is like is not real life, right? Not quiet and sitting down and with our fingers crossed. We actually have to be able to have conversation, and we know about time and place, and we have that understanding. But in school, excuse me, you're not talking at this point. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. And so a lot of times it's handicapping children in order for them to really gain those foundational skills to matriculate and to develop. And so we're leaning more on the academic in this day and age than we are regarding their developmental levels and how they're able to socialize, what their well-being looks like. Is more on an assessment versus a child's ability to ask for help. Like, I think that's concerning.
Well, let's push a little bit, right? Let's just play the other side of that coin, right? Yeah. So if you're saying, right, let's use the Tennessee rule, right? So Tennessee passed this law, they went through this whole process, families are upset, etc. But what if somebody was like, listen, like, if the kid can't do this, like, how do I measure if they're going to do something? Like, I mean, you don't want the kid to come out not being able to read or write or do some basic stuff, right? And so like, and I always say this, like, this may be a shocker to everybody, but like whenever the state or anybody is setting rules, those are like the bare minimum. It's not supposed to become the standard, right? I watch like superintendents or state folks or, we've got 30% of our kids, they're just boosting these scores, right? And you're like, okay, but like, is that going to lead them to a job? Is that going to lead them to be self-sustaining? Is that, what we fluff about, right? To help the community feel good about, right? Doesn't really always yield to what people would say some form of success, right? So what do you say? Like, okay, if the kid can't read up to the 4th grade,
should they be moving?
Yeah, should they? Like, what do you do? Like you can't tell by it's okay.
No, I'm 100%. They should not move forward. I should not have an 8th grader who does not know how to write a sentence in with the correct punctuation, right? Mm-hmm. And in the same breath, I'm thinking back sometimes to the civil rights era when when Black people sustained themselves, and it was all children of all ages in the same classroom, because, well, who was going to teach them? And they still learn. And they still learn at their developmental levels. And so also being a school counselor, I'm thinking of special education. And then in special education, children have what? IEPs. What is that? An individualized education plan. But what if I told you that every child has an IEP? Every child should have an individualized education plan. Oftentimes, though, of course, the normal, in a sense, a student who is essentially presenting as the norm, they don't have an IEP, right? And so it's just meet these standards and you go to the next level, when in actuality, there's a way that they're supposed to learn, right? I have young children. I'm watching each of my sons. I have 3 sons and they're all under the age of 3. Well, they're 3. And I'm like,
ooh, you are busy.
Oh, yeah.
This is makeup for a reason. But I'm looking at him tiny sons. Yes. And I'm like, this one, he remembers visually. He's going to remember off memory. This one, he actually needs for it to be modeled, and then he'll model right after. And then the youngest, I don't know how he's going to learn, but these are the things I know to look for and watch as an educator, but also as a mother, right? And so the way that I supplement my child's education will be very particular, intentional, right? Because some parents don't know that. So then all they do is rely on the school system. Well, that's your job. You were supposed to teach them that.
Yeah, because you're supposed to teach everything in the school.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Well, but I wanted to tap back into what you were just talking about in the sense of that there's such a heavy reliance on academia, right? And academic progress. Yeah. And we know that there's value to that, right? The case in point, we don't want a child to just continue to be pushed on and then they get to 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade and are unable to read a passage or write a sentence efficiently. But I think what you may have been leaning into or want to talk a little bit deeper on is how do we create a balance between the academic portions that are important, right? Because we also need individuals who are going to sustain our society, who are going to contribute back positively and those things. But how do we also consider the development of children outside of academics?
Yes. Yeah.
Because then you also reach 8th grade students who, I mean, let's be fair, some adults struggle with their own regulation of their emotions, but let's call that. But how do you also focus on the fact that, hey, at 13, developmentally, their brain hasn't fully developed, so they're going to make some interesting choices, if you know what I mean. But how do we balance that out? Saying, hey, I want you to focus on academics. But if we did abolish this grade level thing, how do we also center on developmental pieces that are important?
Yeah. Because also, right, we have qualitative and quantitative data, right? And so a lot of the times as a counselor, a lot of us, we often have qualitative data and it doesn't really hit the same, right? And so being in my position, not only am I the founding counselor, but I'm also the KIPP Nashville counselor, counselor lead, essentially. And so a big push has been, we got to show them numbers now. We have to show them numbers because unfortunately, that's what gets the ball rolling. Mm-hmm.
So let me push you a little bit on that thinking, right? So, if you took a test like, let's think about NWEA, right? So let's say the Northwestern Evaluation Assessment or something like that's called. Right, it's this test that kids take to do better in reading, right? Right. So it determines what reading level or something like that, right? So kid takes a test. You got all these kids that score differently. Mm-hmm. They finish scoring all these different sets of scores, right? Then you have to group and categorize how you're going to get their learning to differentiate, right? Which is the buzz educational word, right? Right. And what you end up finding is as you're putting them in these grouping, kids are starting to see themselves separate, right? Because this strategy is a one size fits all, right? To determine who can do it, who can't do it, how we figure out assessment, blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to have some kids that are going to learn and do well. You have some kids that are not going to do well. And then some kids are just going to bomb at it for a number of set of reasons. Could be, they weren't exposed to vocabulary early. It could be, home environment issues, you name it, whatever the situation.
Sure.
So then you start to differentiate where kids are. And then you start grouping. And then now you have these kids in a class that the school system has differentiated within its own classes.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? I just want to give you context on how this thing rolls. This is how our system rolls, right?
Wow.
And then we say, here's who's good, here's who's not. We give awards to who scores high, who doesn't score. Hello?
I heard.
Schools then turn around, you guys as counselors take them and they either get scholarship money or not, right? So if you don't do as well or you didn't perform whatever you didn't perform, right? So then you start to create even more of a have and have not society, right? I mean, I bring all this up to say, the more you think about this whole grade levels, all this stuff, do you not think in some way, sometimes these things kind of I want to use the word segregate us in a way, but it creates more of the different type of divides, right? Versus like if you had kids in more like a project-based approach or something like that,
100%. That's what
you would get a whole different structure on performance. Huh? What do you think about that?
I love that. And honestly, that's what I was getting at is if we killed grade levels, I'm thinking of a project-based approach. I'm thinking of a nature-based approach, especially for our little ones, because kids learn through play. And I remember me and my husband were visiting a couple of different schools for our two oldest sons. And they were saying, hey, yeah, we're not going to do the regular seating. We're changing things up and we're doing stations. Kids learn through play. So they're just it's going to look like they're playing, but they're learning. And I was like, I'm listening, right? Because that is how young children learn, right? And then also, oftentimes I'm talking to our different teachers, and where kids, especially kids with language barriers, where they learn most and they excel in
science.
Because they're doing projects. It allows them to be able to output other than orally, other than writing. They get to actually put their hands to something and create something and make something work. And so over the years, I've been taking note like, okay, they are bombing ELA. They are bombing history. Too many words, right? Then they are able to approach something, go outside, go into nature, start a project, collaborate with their classmates. That's when I see our students excel. So I think that that's quite phenomenal to think like that, of like taking that approach. I think naturally in the American mind, people are like, well, that makes no sense. Wouldn't things get confused? And like I said, well, no, because we can look back 60 plus years and see that Black people who went on to get degrees themselves, who went on to become professors themselves, who went on to have careers for themselves, were probably taught in the same classroom as someone who was their senior, someone who was older, someone who was young. And so that type of learning exists. Homeschoolers do it all the time, right?
And that's a big push recently.
Huge.
Huge. I mean, post-COVID, that's a whole other, we know the landscape of education has obviously shifted drastically. So in that same realm, though, I'm curious, for a school counselor like you,
yep,
if we were to go to like these project-based learning models, or I even think of, we had Dr. Blake, right? That we spoke with, and the great, redesign push that they're having in his area, where kids are having the opportunity to create their own businesses and basically sell the things that go with their business, which, I mean, where was this when I was in Toby Witch early? I mean, where have we gone wrong? But so in that line of thinking, say we were to pivot to project-based learning, or if ages 14 through 18 were in a classroom and they're learning entrepreneurial skills, and the way that they're graded is like building a business model, or who knows, right? How would you, in your role as a school counselor or any other school counselor, how would you engage in being a part of their educational journey? Like, how would you measure your success? What would your role be in matriculations or things of that nature? I'm curious. We're thinking unlimited, right? Like we're putting things out there.
Yeah.
What would your vision for that be?
I mean, well, first and foremost, funny enough, I work for a charter school system. And so actually my approach to counseling is not the norm. I am still the 504 coordinator like most counselors are. But then outside of that, I genuinely do counseling. I'm not, I don't schedules. I'm like, that is scary. I can't believe people do that. This is not, like, I don't do any of that. I stay far, far away from it. Even testing, the only place I land in testing is like taking my 504 students and testing them. But outside of that, like, we are not just thrown every which way, but also I had to lay that foundation early on and let them know, like, hey, the work that we do is just as important, if not the most important, just their well-being, right? So that I didn't get tossed into all types of different things that may not have necessarily, used my skills to the benefit of the school. So all that said, I think that would be a huge shift for the American education system. And so helping students learn how to collaborate and and conflict resolution is a big part of my job already. And I think that would be a big part of my job if we were to shift to that. Just because project-based learning is, we have to be able to collaborate. We have to work in groups. Some kids don't like to do that. And sometimes they want to do it on their own, but
which is problematic.
which is problematic.
Or even just learning how to disagree. I think that's like a huge.
Oh my goodness. Some kids, like most kids, they actually go straight to it. It is a debate. It is hot. I'm like, y'all, you know that you can just be like, respectfully, I understand where you're coming from. And I have to teach kids that. Going into teach kids, hey, I don't agree, instead of cursing each other out because they did food. Like, that's what we do it. You know, and so they don't have, again, the really basic skills to have, you know, proper dialogue. And so I think that I would definitely still be having a job if we transitioned over to that space, but it would have a lot to do with like more so, I think restorative justice focused, which I love anyways, but in how to ensure that we are not, you know, experiencing conflict in a way that we can't handle it, and it escalates and kind of boils over into something that it shouldn't. It's nothing to just say, hey, we don't necessarily see eye to eye moving forward. And I think that's a funky, weird place to be in for some kids. So they go from like either 0 to 100. It's never in between.
Let me push a little bit around this grading stuff, or these, you know, grade levels in school stuff. So there's always this argument around in schools when people are looking at data. We as a society love to group and categorize. I hate to tell people that, but that's a reality, right? Yep. Sometimes we group and categorize by race. Sometimes we group and categorize by community that you live in. Sometimes we may group and categorize by socioeconomics, even though I have tilted over the years to believe that socioeconomics plays a much larger factor on certain things than race does sometimes.
100.
Sometimes, and they can coincide depending on what community you come from, what's been the history of that, blah, 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 right? And they'll talk about like, you know, well, this black kid's going through this Hispanic kid's going through this Asian kid's going through this Indian, you know. But what I always notice that people don't always look at is what is the socioeconomic that child's coming from, right? Because I think sometimes that you may find more kids that are in certain socioeconomic brackets going through some similar experiences. And notice I said the word some, right? Because I do think there are experiences that are truly based also by, you know, race, class, and all of that other stuff. But really when you think about it, you know, I guess the question I wanted to get out and ask you is, in the patterns that you usually see when you are supporting, or, you know, that kids are either doing good, not doing good, and they're learning it from grade to grade, do you find that whole socioeconomic factor plays more of a factor on where kids are thinking about what they want to become, what they want to do, how they go with technology, or do you think it's much more race-based? It's a black, white, yellow, green thing.
No, definitely. I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think it's socioeconomics. Again, we operate in extremes oftentimes. And so in my network of schools, we have 9 schools now, maybe going on 10. And each of them are spread out through Nashville. I'm in more so of an, you know, culturally diverse area, Antioch. But most of my kids come from middle class family. And so my set of issues do not compare to my East Nashville schools. Sito, you know where I know you know East Nashville.
Yeah.
That
for our audience, East Nashville is a much poorer area. You know, not as many resources, less affluent, right? You know, and the reality is, you know, when you travel from city to city, this is the dynamic. It doesn't matter where you are in the country, right? Because I was fortunate to be able to go to different parts of the country to work and see different things, but I noticed patterns, right? And, you know, and I know sometimes we try to summarize and say, well, everyone's like this or that. It's not true. Like, everyone's experience is different because these patterns are either similar or different.
Well, I mean, to your point, like, you could be within the same school district, right? But if you're on one side of the school district compared to another side of the school district, your experiences are different. So sorry, continue about.
Yeah. And so essentially I was going to say, I definitely think over the years, I think we naturally, our race is always going to be the conversation, right? But when we really, and I think me and my colleagues always talk about this, but when we start to really flip that lid, underneath race is all those other things, which is socioeconomic status, things of that nature. And I definitely think it's definitely more leaning towards socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter what the child's race is per se. I mean, again, being at a school that's very diverse, a lot of my kids still deal with the same things. And I'm talking culturally diverse. I'm telling you, I have Middle Eastern families, I have Hispanic families, and these kids are still doing the same things. This year, we have had an overwhelming amount of threat assessments that we've had to do. A threat assessment means is when a child makes a threat, that it can come out as transient, it can be viable, but we have to essentially run an entire threat assessment on this child to say whether, it holds any weight. And oftentimes when we have to do one, a child does unfortunately have to have some level of suspension. But with my students who are families, they're threats left and right. Like, everything is a joke. Everything is, whereas my students in East Nashville, we just try to make sure they get to school every day. So they're having attendance. They're having absenteeism. They're not even there. And when they show up, it's us making sure they just have the basic necessities, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter about race. It's all kids across the board.
Yeah.
So how does that play into grade levels and all that?
That was a great question too, because I was wondering, when you also look at the realities that, depending on your socioeconomic status, that can also hinder your level of education, right?
That's right.
We know that's a reality, and not just the level of education of the children that are in the classrooms, but also their parents, right?
Sure.
So for most parents, grade levels and grades are how they track their child's performance. Like, that is how I know whether or not, okay, my child has an A, okay, my child is rocking, doing the thing, we're good.
Right.
But now if you go into this whole gradeless, skill-based, project-based learning, how would you as a parent, or any parent be able to decipher and say, oh, my child is doing well? Or, and going deeper into communities where they may not have as much access, their parents are even limited English themselves, or they have limited education themselves. How do anyone gauge whether or not my children's doing well? Again, we're thinking, limitless possibilities.
Yes,
How would I?
Yeah, I think as we talk, right, I'm going down the route of every school is not going to be able to adapt that form education, point blank period. Some schools will, some schools won't. And I think the schools that won't are the schools that it benefits them to be able to see their child matriculate to the next level and have that, picture of this is where they were last year.
Like the traditional setting.
100%. This is why we always, when families are mad, upset sometimes, and we've done everything we can. We go, well, this is a school of choice because it is a school of choice. They can choose to be here or not, right? And so a lot of our schools in general, is not always a child's own school. Sometimes it's a school of choice that they've chosen to go to, and they operate in a certain kind of way. And there's other schools that are a little bit more traditional, and that works for some families. And so I think some schools will be able to adapt to that project-based learning, which some of them have, and others will have to just keep that traditional ways, just because, again, as we kind of talk about it a little bit more, it makes more sense. Thinking about the socioeconomic status of some students, just the environment they may be coming out of, and in the lack of resources that their parents might have in understanding some of the platform and frameworks of schools. My mom, coming from another country, I remember her saying, when my brother was in school, just her trying to adapt to she taught in Haiti, but when she came here, what is this? And so just going to understand that it's helpful, I think, for a parent coming from another context. But it can also, it just depends on the school, on the family, honestly. And that's how I try to handle a lot of our situations. Is I have some hard conversations sometimes with some families, like, I don't know if this setting is the best for your child in terms of them being able to thrive. Because again, our school is really academically challenging. And so if you're in a situation where, well, my child needs a paraprofessional and this and that, I'm at a charter school. Our hands are kind of tied when it comes to having some additional supports, whereas our local zone school, they have all the things. They have all, and so you may not like the zone school, but the benefits that you'll get going to the zone school outweigh essentially what we can provide your child. Again, academically challenging, but you can't, but at that foundational level, they don't have language. That's huge. That's huge. And so I think it's going to come down to what families choose, and all schools won't essentially be able to do the project-based learning. Now that we talk about it more, I'm like, that'll be tough. That'll be tough.
So right now, the traditional pathway for going from high school to college to career, or high school to career, like those things, that evolution is changing, right? You see it everywhere you go in the country. Everybody's like, the college and career, we're going to get kids.
Dr. Blake said, ready for what's next.
I think it's what next. That's how he worked for his community, right? So my question here is like, how does killing grade levels better prepare students for a future where skill-based credentialing and continuous learning is now the thing that's talked about the most?
Well, that's huge. I think that's huge. Just thinking of transferable skills, a lot of things I call my transferable skills are things that I learned on the job, things that I learned in experiencing what that line of work felt like and looked like. It wasn't necessarily what I can say, oh yeah, in 8th grade, I learned these things, and that, like, I can't even really quantify what those things were, but it was me going through different experiences that helped me be prepared. And so we think of like a big thing for school counselors is teaching students like life skills, right? And so part of life skills is being able to communicate effectively, being able to ask for help, right? And so that's a big part of learning, right? If you're learning a new thing, a new concept, and you're not able to raise your hand and ask for help, that's concerning. Or some students, they rather ask for help via email. Like we have some kids who will just email a teacher.
That's interesting. Instead of like asking,
they won't raise their hand.
Wow. But talk about like, that's adaptability. Like that is 100%. Granted, you want a child, a human, right? No matter what, you want them to be able to advocate for themselves in some capacity. And sometimes, the police officer is giving you a ticket. You're not going to be able to email the police officer and say like, what did I do wrong?
Listen,
I
want to email the officer.
So that's interesting, but I guess there's also some positive notes to that too.
100%. I like that you said adaptability, because I'm definitely my first to go to. Whenever I talk to parents and teachers, it's always in the affirmative, right? So I'm like, dope, you were still able to get what you needed to get across, right? But in the here and now, when something is happening and you need to be able to say something with your mouth, that's what it can become a little funny, a little stressful.
Well, and let's talk a little bit more about that adaptability piece, because now we're going non-traditional, no grade levels. Then let's throw another monkey in there. And we also are in the huge push of AI, right? We have artificial intelligence that's infusing all aspects of our life, right? Not just, gosh, I remember a few years ago, I went to a Cowboys game in Atlanta, and we were parking in the garage, and there was like the little robot thing in the garage, right? And this was in 2017, okay? We're almost 10 years later. But that being said, AI is taking over. We got to adapt with the times, right? So my question is, how would a flexible non-grade educational system really equip students, with adaptability, with problem-solving skills, with those critical thinking skills that are needed to thrive alongside it? Because the reality is it's not going away, right? We're literally digging our heels in deeper each day. So yeah, what are your thoughts on?
Well, I'm just cracking up in my head because I'm thinking of instances where, and it's not always good, but like, let's say kids make a kid makes a fake page and doing all this stuff. And oftentimes when we find out who the kid is, we're like, how did he know how to do all that? What? They learn. They learn very quickly. And again, they don't need to know the language. They don't need to be at their grade level. Kids can pick up on things. And so I think in a way, having AI introduced at this time is like awesome and really, really helpful. I think of, even some artificial intelligences that help people who can't speak and who are nonverbal. I think my niece has autism, and she's now utilizing the device. She's 4 and able to tell my sister, like, boom.
It is such a beautiful thing. I've seen plenty of kiddos use it. It's amazing.
Just wonderful. So I think in a lot of ways it advances our kids in a sense, learning how to adapt, learning how to use what the future is going to look like. I think I just worry about, again, just that psychological well-being in that ability to apply themselves, truly knowing the information that they're sharing. Because sometimes when I sit down with kids after they've made some choice decisions, they really don't understand what it is that they were communicating. Sometimes I'm like, do you understand like how serious this is, or do you know what you were saying? And it's kind of like they're now repeating out back. They're just these machines that,
What you're saying, yeah.
yeah, it's not them in their own thoughts anymore. It's just, I just heard somebody TikTok the biggest. I said, why did you say that? Why would you say? Well, I heard on TikTok. So it's just regurgitating information, and it's not actually in their own thoughts. And I think that's the concern we all have for everybody. Like, yeah, this AI is a tool. AI is not a sensor. And so I need to be very weary of kids hopping on AI as young as they are, because now everything is ChatGPT said, well, what do you say? That's the
But let me push a little bit, Sarah. So is the issue about the technology, or is it the issue on how people are utilizing
100%.
and doing analysis of that, right? So like, because I would argue that I think AI is a great tool, right? I think the question to me has more to do is
The
utilization of it, how you get people to do analysis. Like, I just go back to that whole, when we were in college with the calculator, right? When TI 82, I can't remember the number, came out. We used to use Casios back then. I'm giving my age.
Yeah, because I had a TI. I was like, wait, you remember this?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit older than you, but I remember that, and they were like, "Oh, you're gonna stop doing math." Just stop doing math, but it just became higher levels of thinking about how to solve certain equations and problems, right? So, and I think of like the tool is in the same space, right? I mean, in schools, from my perspective, are way behind you. I go around in the country and you hear everybody, oh, I'm doing this great thing, right? And what they're doing is just figuring out how to fancy way to use ChatGPT, right? Or I'm going to write a prompt in a particular way, but the question is like, can you have a process to have people do different levels of thinking and analysis in a way to problem solve, maybe creating a company, or problem solve how to build this faster, or problems like those should be the
More so, are you speaking on it like efficiency?
Efficiency, right? Like that's how I think people should be thinking. But now you hear, every time I go watch one of these people out there, education people love to praise themselves, right? So, you sit there like, okay. But what you notice is that how that tool is being used is not, this is why I say schools are behind, or not being used in that particular way, not yet anyway. And so I bring this up to say to your comment, like, okay, like I don't think it's AI is the issue more than it is that the people who are teaching kids how to do it, they just have not formulated and understanding what's the best ways to do things.
100%.
And I think that to me is where the real problem is.
Well, and then you also consider young people using it, and developmentally, they don't know what they're doing and how it can be useful. Or as you mentioned, how they're being taught to use it. But I also will push further and say, how many of them are actually being taught how to use it versus just going out on their own?
So I was just going to say, Tatiana, to add to your initial question of like, how does all of that kind of merge and mesh, right? The AI and the project-based learning, it's media literacy. And so while you guys were talking, I was just like, I'm thinking of Miss Dot. I'm going to ask my brother if you remember Miss Dot. Miss Dot was like, I don't know how Miss Dot was still there by the time I got to elementary school, but me, my brother, and sister all had Miss Dot, and she taught media literacy. This is down from typing all the way to like, how do you use? I remember even taking media literacy course in college, and I was like, that's when, you have to have your bibliography at the end, and you need to but knowing how to use that correctly. And so that's essentially what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, well, that needs to be a huge part of kids learning right now is, to your point, Sito, people knowing how to teach, how to use said devices, said, tools, because I 100% agree. If you don't go ahead and write that thing down in ChatGPT, the way I put my son's 3rd birthday party together in 2 seconds,
Give you the whole plan.
but it's the work, it's the template, the bones. Sometimes you need it to be written out for you, but then I'm still doing the work. And so, the media literacy piece has been lost, I think, over the years. But I remember it. Back in 1990, whatever. Just little old me just learning. Oh my goodness, I was so enthralled. I was like, this is amazing. And I think because it's happening maybe faster than people can kind of catch it, it's harder than the teacher.
Okay, I have, maybe is this our final question, maybe? So we're talking about approaches for AI. We're also talking about potential unlocking of how to utilize it in a way that we think is more appropriate, right? I now want to talk a little bit about student agency, because this is also a part of this, right? And how we also are in the process of pivoting the way that we look at how students need to engage in their education, and utilizing their voice and allowing them to say, hey, this is maybe how I want to learn. Maybe these are the things I'd like to learn, or things of that nature. So for that specific area in regards to student agency, how would the system work without fixed grade levels? Like, how would students be able to exercise their agency in that space? If we're unlocking that potential, what would that look like? In your opinion?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with just that collaboration with the teacher. And I think a lot of schools do currently model that in different ways. And it's just that, hey, am I on the right track type of thing? I know that our school teachers often are kind of making constant rounds around the classroom and kind of letting a child know if they're on the right track, if they need to kind of go back and look over if they're not in the right space. And so I often think, I don't say this enough to my kids, but it's not a teacher gave you a grade. It's quite frankly the grade you earn. Because a lot of times when we're dealing with stuff, it's like, well, she gave me, and I'm like, she gave you? Well, if we go back and look at the assignment things, and I talk to the teachers, hey, did they initiate, especially with my 8th graders, because they're going to high school. And if I hear that you did not initiate not one conversation with this teacher, and they gave you a grade, no, that's the grade that you earned, right? Because there was no conversation around how you can improve, or how you can sit down with this teacher if and when they had some time to just collaborate on ways you can get better. And so I think it just kind of lands on that piece heavily, is just how the teacher wants to engage with the child, and the teacher want to engage with one another. And also I often tell parents and families that they have agency there too, on how they supplement their child's education, or even show up for their child at school, so that it doesn't end up turning into a conversation of, well, isn't that y'all's job? No, it's a partnership. And so we often talk about school and home as being a partnership. The best situation would be if what we're doing at school could be mirrored at home, but we understand that every household operates differently. So that is not something that we're making a requirement, but that would be helpful. And so, I think that is a huge piece. Is a big piece would be just collaborating with your teacher. I'm not really able to think and flesh out all the details right now, but it would be a huge collaborative piece and effort on the.
I had thought about too, like if you were doing, it's like project-based learning, like could you set up like your own rubric? Like what would that look like? And I thought too, I was like, wouldn't it be cool, like, if they had, like, kids made their own, like, syllabus for their course, and, like, that, like, from, this is what I would like to learn in August, this is what I'd like to learn in, but man, wouldn't that be a rabbit hole of all the different things that are going to come from that?
But you know what?
Yeah.
But imagine it. We're talking about unlimited possibilities, right? But so what if a school decided to say, hey, I'm going to give the topic to the kids with what they need to learn and tell the kids to design what that class should look like, chapter to chapter, content to content, and then come up with how you should be measured to know how you measure.
Yes. Yes.
And in that process of doing that, the measurement does not have to be a test. The measurement must be something that's a project-based approach.
Love it.
Right, like a hands-on tool or something.
Imagine that a school tried that or just did that as a class. I wonder, one, what would the type of learning be because of the investment? Two, what the kids would actually write down in terms of the learning, right? And number three, how would they measure success and outcome?
The level of engagement would be top tier.
Top tier. Top.
So, I mean, you never know. We need somebody to experiment. Actually, people experiment on NASA so we can come and take a look.
Get on another phone. I'm so serious because I'm like,
There's somebody out there listening to our YouTube channel or seeing us on TikTok or whatever our platforms. If you want to experiment that and call us to come out to see you, we'd love to talk to you about what that looks like. You know, because you always hear people. I say this in like a very humbling space. Like, you go around and everybody tells you they're innovating, they're doing this, they're doing that. And I get to go to a lot of places in the country, right, to see certain things. And it's not as innovative as you think it is, right? And I mean,
push back on that. I think there's also realities that we exist in education where teachers genuinely do feel like their ability to be innovative has almost been like completely
eradicated.
Like that, like it's barely existent.
We're in a space now where people are putting in prompts in AI for whatever, right? So check AI that to figure out how to get the policy to jiggle around it. It's like something I wish we should put that in AI. Listen, how do you get around these folks and their policies, right? So we have some more time for teachers to do their
innovation and do the things that is not better to do.
But I even learned even at the adult level, say that it's the what you get evaluated by, your rubric, whatever. We have a counselor's evaluation, and I'll never forget, we created one was created, and my whole team of counselors was like, what is that? And who created that? And we were like, well, they did. And I think a lot of times when it's a person who does not necessarily have the credentials, or it's not the person who has to perform and be evaluated, it's like, I don't want to do that. Whereas this year, actually, a goal of ours is to recreate the entire school counselor handbook as well as what will be evaluated. So how much more will they be,
the level of engagement will look different.
That's all. Because you created it, right? And so I think with kids, it's the same thing. I don't who, what's the assessment? You don't even remember they have a test that day. Whereas, hey, no, this is your entrepreneurship course, and it's the business that you created. Talk to us, and they be ready to go. So I think that's a lot to say there, and that's a brilliant idea.
Well, Sarah, we don't know how much to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. The school counselor premier, the mother of three. I mean, you're like Superwoman, and all the stuff you do. But I also heard you doing great work, we really always appreciate that you're taking the time to come and share your thoughts. As we showed everybody, we try to get out episodes where we're talking about things that are, what we should unlearn, or things that we learned that we think didn't really help us in life, right? Or things that are unlimited, which are possibilities. And I think we talked about a few of those there. So we really thank you for coming on the show. This was what if we killed grades? What is that grade levels, and what does that mean? So, this conversation only scratches the surface of a lot of good things. So if this episode has sparked anything for anybody out there, please go in to our comment section and make some comments under our podcast, wherever you get your podcast. If you follow YouTube or you go on TikTok, wherever, please make sure you put some comments around some ideas and some groundbreaking discussions around this. We want to actually hear from you. We'd love to see when people are engaging with thought-provoking thoughts around what they hear. And also, if you have questions for Sarah too, we can get out there, and we always try to send questions people ask us for our guests. You'd be surprised. Some of these questions are sometimes they're good or off the wall, but it's all good. The goal is to talk about ideas, share ideas, and also talk about how education and culture clashes in a lot of different ways. And we think that really makes the real difference in what we discuss. So outside of that, Sarah, any last thing you want to share with the group before we let you go?
Nothing more. Just y'all be well out here with everything that's going on. You as Department of Education, things of that nature. I think for our educators, just find your people, stay connected, be connected, stay in community, especially as it relates to just work. And hopefully that will alleviate some of the burdens that we're currently feeling.
All right. Well, we thank you so much. Make sure you go out there, share, like, and subscribe to our channel. And that's us, Unlearned Unlimited podcast. Thank you.
Unlearned Unlimited. Wait. Unlearned Unlimited. Yeah.